Well, as far as the national scene goes, we may have seen the last of the Pac-12 when we saw Oregon go down to Stanford late in the ball game there at Palo Alto. We're going to dice it up with Mike Black from Fifth Quarter College Football over the next hour. We invite you in, as always, to join us for the discussion. Bring those comments and questions, debate topics, and just leave them in the live chat. Mike, how we doing tonight?
Good, other than you're writing us off a little too early, my man.
I said maybe, and I think I threw an if in there. I know better than to write teams off and conferences off for sure until it's really for sure, because us online types like to do that.
If Oregon loses again, the Pac-12 is pretty much written off, though. No other Pac-12 team gets the benefit of the doubt of more than like having that one loss and be like, okay, they can still get in. If another Pac-12 team that's not Oregon, like Arizona State, has one loss, and they win the conference, they're not going to get in because they'll put in Ohio State, or they'll put in some other team who has one loss who's fighting for that fourth spot with them.
Well, what Oregon obviously has is that head-to-head against Ohio State, even though the AP and coaches poll still want to place Ohio State above Oregon already.
Arizona State's only loss to their benefit is going to be against the top 10 BYU.
Yes. So top 10 for now, BYU.
Yeah, for now.
So let's get into this with the Stanford game first and foremost. It was a game that it was only about a touchdown spread on the game, so Vegas certainly thought it was going to be competitive.
Always is.
I thought Oregon was going to cover, but I certainly wasn't sure about it. And it was a game that I checked in to periodically as Oregon was trailing in the first half as much as 17-7, came back, took that 24-17 lead. What happened the last quarter of the game? I caught the last few drives. There were a lot of things that went completely off the rails.
So the play calling actually wasn't bad. And Devin Williams was playing on the field a lot, and he was getting open. We actually you talk about the last offensive drive or the last defensive drive?
Just the last few drives of the game.
So offensively, the last few drives of the game, we had a lot of missed reads by Anthony Brown, and even the most staunch of Anthony Brown fans have admitted that was a bad game. He even said after the game he played terribly. We had a outside pitch, and it looked like it was designed to be an outside pitch. Like the tackle pulled outside, the guard pulled to the outside where the tackle would be at. So they both pulled, and he runs up the middle. Instead of pitching it to Verdell, there was a tackle one-on-one with a corner, and then Verdell with nobody else. It was just a tackle, had to make a block on a corner, and it was a touchdown. And he keeps it, runs up the middle, gets stuffed. There was earlier on in the game, he's going, he's looking. We have easy handoff to Verdell. He could bounce to the outside, probably 20, 30 yards. Runs it up the middle, 2 yards. He has this one play. I even showed you that play of that interception where he just looks like he intended to throw it to the Stanford player. Like, I don't know where that was going. When it comes to the defensive drive, I don't know how any Oregon fan could be mad at the defense. The defense at that point was down 7 starters. 7. And they played well. That was not pass interference. That was not a hold. It was called holding.
It wasn't based on the way they had called the previous couple plays. For some reason, Stanford didn't think that they should call a legitimate play in the last 4 or 5. Like everything was a fade. Is that all that they could come up with?
Let's throw
a fade to both corners.
That's how they beat us every time they play us. It's throwing the fade with a bigger, because they put tight ends out at wide receiver. So when they're in the red zone, they throw a fade and hope the bigger guy grabs the ball. The only issue with it this time was we had the athletes who would go up with them guys, and you're not we seen Mykael Wright was playing great coverage on that. He's just like, you're not gonna just sun me like that. You're not gonna big boy me in the with a fade route. I mean, but you try it 100 times and one of them's gonna work, and it did. Pac-12 officiating is what it is. You got to live with it.
Yeah, you're right. The final play that there was pass interference on before the touchdown pass that tied the game. The final play that prolonged the game. If you would have stood that play up against the couple previous plays with the same players, it looked like the same hand fighting.
Mm-hmm. And you're in the red zone, and it's a bigger receiver against a smaller corner, and they're hand fighting, and you call holding on the corner. It's a really weird call, but it's also the Pac-12. I mean, last major loss I remember losing to them for was, did you know in the Pac-12 and only in the Pac-12, the pylon is extension of out of bounds, not the end zone? Only in the Pac-12. Our player dives, touches the pylon with the football. They roll him out of bounds. It's a touchback, 14-point swing. It's Pac-12 officiating. It's been like this for years, so we can't blame them for losing the game because we know what the Pac-12 refs are, and we know you have to win in spite of that. And it shouldn't have come down to that anyways. We shouldn't have had to stop them from going to overtime to win the game. Like the game, if you're looking at how the teams were playing to start the season, if you're looking at the rosters, if you're looking at the turnover, I mean, how many players did Stanford lose to the portal a year or two ago? Like their entire roster nearly, it seemed like. There's no reason for it to be that close. But, I was really upset with it. But at the same time, CJ Verdell went down. Triquez Bridges got ejected. Kayvon Thibodeau got ejected. And we were already down so many starters. Like Drew Mathis was the starting middle linebacker. He got hurt. Flo came in. Flo got hurt. Now Keith Brown's in. Keith Brown wasn't 100% because he was hurt last week. And it's attrition. I mean, it's what's going to happen when you're trying to be a physical team. Alabama and Georgia's injury lists look just as long most years, even around this time, because when you're trying to out physical everybody you're playing, players are going to get hurt. It comes with the play style. It's just Oregon right now, their depth is there. They have talent on the depth. It's just not experience. They don't have the reps. They haven't been in the locker room long enough. They weren't ready for it yet, and they got shoved into it. And honestly, that game really, even the most staunch fans are going to admit, that game comes down to Anthony Brown. Anthony Brown made mistakes on the reads. The offensive coordinator can call a perfect play, but if the quarterback doesn't execute, it's a terrible play. Especially when they're replays like that.
14 of 26 for a $186 and a pick. And so how would you chart Anthony Brown, his progress throughout this season? At one point you thought he didn't get in the way against Ohio State. He made the right reads. He didn't play any kind of dynamic game or put them on his back, but he complemented the running game and played relatively well in that game. They had a close call against Fresno State. They had a close call for
Arizona
into the second half against Arizona. Then they pulled away in the fourth quarter.
Late in the fourth.
So how did he play in those games?
Well, let's just say Stony Brook is the only game he was over 50% completions. And even in the Ohio State game, you're under 50% completion.
He was under 50% against Ohio State?
Every game against Stony Brook, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, he's 14 out of 26 here, so he wasn't.
Yeah, he was one over 50%, I think. I was going into this game. That was the stat that I had.
Okay.
He's played decently enough. I mean, there's a reason that game against Arizona was close going into the fourth quarter. And I mean, especially against that Arizona team lost in Northern Arizona. There is no way our starters should have been playing at the start of the fourth quarter, and they were. And when we played that Stony Brook game, we pulled away more. We were scoring more, moving the ball better when Anthony Brown seemingly got hurt. No, nobody's going to wish injury on anybody. Obviously, we don't want the kid to get hurt. But the offense performed better when he wasn't on the field. That's all I have to say. Like the offense has performed better every time he's not been on the field.
So here's the good and bad statistically. And I only saw the Ohio State game. I sat here taking calls during the Arizona game, and I was a bit surprised that it was staying that close, but I can't say that I really was able to dissect that game sitting here taking calls. So basically the Ohio State game is what I saw start to finish. That was his first for as bad an interception as what you sent me against Stanford, which if you haven't seen it, folks, check it out. It is about as horrible an interception as you could possibly find. It was his first pick of the year.
Because, I mean, look at how many opportunities he's had to throw the ball. He's throwing it 20 times, 25 times at most. And most of those are going to be a 3-yard slant route to Jalen Red or a 3-yard bubble route to the tight end, or you're going to miss matches against Stony Brook and against Ohio State. Obviously, we were attacking the linebackers. The linebackers were a little slower, and we have smaller wide receivers who could run really fast. So they're obviously going to have a step, easy short throws. That was also on an easy short throw. And I know you probably didn't watch this game against Stanford because nobody expected to be as close as it was. But against Stanford, we gave him a chance to throw some deep balls. We had Devin Williams open, overthrown. His longest throw was 66 yards, but the throw in the air was 3 yards. So despite what, like, it says, ESPN's little box score, it's going to say long 66. But then you go look at the game and you look at the pass. It's like, well, I mean, sure.
Yeah, that's the backer wide receiver doing all the work. Yes.
So he's definitely, this game was by far his worst. But the issue was, and there are even people who used to play for Oregon who defend him and used to play for Oregon who were saying he was trying to play hero ball, which is what it looked like. Whenever it was an option and he had the option to either keep it or give it to somebody else, he was keeping it and trying to make his play, trying to make that big play. And like, it's Stanford. We should have just bullied them the entire game. It's one of the first times we could say this. We're bigger than Stanford. We're stronger than Stanford, and we're more physical than Stanford. Like, why didn't we just run the ball down the middle? And when we did that, it was successful. In the third quarter, when we were running the ball more, we were scoring, we were moving downfield, and we just, once the read option started breaking down and he wasn't, actually making the read and he was just holding onto the ball and trying to, make that, not, I wouldn't say Heisman moment, but like his big moment, be like, how that's like the I prove the doubters wrong moment. And it just didn't work out. Now, if he could perform like he played against Ohio State every week, where he didn't make any mistakes, he made most of the right reads, give or take one or two. And honestly, we can't give him the opportunity to try and throw deep because we didn't really try and throw many deep balls against Ohio State. And it didn't cost us plays. I mean, when we tried to throw deep balls against Stanford, yes, it wasn't a pick, but it cost us a play. It cost us a chance to get that first down. You got 3 chances to get a first down, sometimes 4. And if one of them's an incompletion deep, you're making it harder on your team, especially with how withered away due to injury. We've been bit by the injury bug bad this year. And it's just, you're making it harder on the team.
Let's bring in the voice of reason here. Let's bring in the level-headed Ryan Winter from Sports Staff 503. Catch him right
Mike,
here on YouTube.
How are you guys?
Good.
I'm doing well.
Wow,
Talking
college
Anthony
football,
Brown.
man. This is what we're here for, right? Jeez, the highs, the lows, everything else.
Mark only
Ryan,
invites me when we lose.
Here's my list. Here's my
Stumbling and
list of
bumbling.
things I wanted to ask you and Mike. This is my list here. Number one, just the general thoughts about Stanford, how the game went, and Mike's piling on, as you can hear.
I
on
know his
Anthony
style.
Brown.
I know. I've been seeing him on
So is
Twitter.
there anything besides Anthony Brown that went wrong in this game? We are everybody else.
The
is
old
blameless.
clock management struck again. We haven't seen that lately. We're in close ball games going forward. I don't think the Ducks are going to blow anybody out. And clock management reared its ugly head again. I mean, what was it, a minute and a half? And you have the ball. All you got to do is score. As soon as they got that first penalty in there, I thought, oh no.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been on team Anthony Brown the whole time. If you want to talk about quarterbacks, because I know Mike loves this discussion.
Love it.
Well, and I said at the beginning of the year, I thought you had to go with the elder statesman going up to Columbus. I thought that was a given. I thought most people agreed with that. But, this year kind of feels now like a little bit maybe like that Dakota Prue Cup year with the little Justin Herbert on the bench as the freshman. And you've got the elder statesman, and then maybe just one loss can get magnified into a much, much bigger situation. Right now through 5 games, Prue Cup had better numbers than what we see with Brown. I just don't understand how, as the Ducks team, the best game of the year was Ohio State. And since then, you've played subpar talent, and you haven't played anywhere close to what you played at Ohio State. Numbers back that up. And now you're dealt with just an absolute slew of injuries now to really key players. And it's just I think it's going to get ugly a little bit here.
I do think the difference in that was, obviously, if you were watching the games, the plays were called differently for that game in comparison to how we've seen the rest of the season play out. And at the same time with that, I seen somebody mention somewhere on Twitter that Oregon will play Alabama and the score will be the same as if they played Arizona. So like we play up to our competition, but we'll also play down to them. Like think of the big games we've played in since Mario's been here: Wisconsin, Auburn, Ohio State. We're not getting beat bad by good teams, but we're also getting beat close by not so good teams.
Yeah, the best games for Cristobal have been the best games, have been the biggest games. The Utah Pac-12 championship game, the USC Pac-12 championship game. Besides that Auburn opener, and even that game you had in the bag until the very end as well. There's something to be said about, clock management. I think that's a big deal. There's a lot of stuff here we can unpack for a long time, but last year, everybody was on Tyler Shuck at this exact same time in the season. Looked okay early, started to stall out, looked like they weren't running the zone the right way, looked like they were getting stalled on drives and on plays. Super inconsistent. One drive would look great. One drive would look totally subpar. I think we're seeing the exact same thing we saw with Shuck last year with Brown this year. I think it's more indicative of the offense than it is the players. And I just don't know if Ty Thompson comes in and changes all of that immediately, especially as a freshman. My other big thing is, and I think that a lot of people would agree on this one is, these coaches have a lot at stake here. They're going to play the better kid. And they're seeing practice. If Ty Thompson was doing that much better, he would have been playing by now. I just think that what you see in practice is exactly what you see in the games, which is pretty good, not great, and I don't think they've ever really played great. Even the game against Ohio State, there were times there where it wasn't like complete perfection, no way near it. So I do think they were overrated early on with the 3 going up to a 3. I thought was a pretty bold move, and if you hadn't played Ohio State and done that game and won that game in that way, there never would have been even thought of in the top 3. No way. I think that Ohio State game did everything for you, and then you just backed it up with some supremely subpar performances.
When it comes to the Tyler Shuck, Anthony Brown thing, I think the big issue is they both had one obvious issue. Tyler Shuck could throw the ball downfield. He couldn't make reads or on the read option or stuff like that to save his life. Anthony Brown was able to make reads on the read option, but as we've seen, cannot throw the ball downfield to save his life. So it's forcing. I don't know if we could blame the offense, but in a sense, it seems like they have a quarterback who can do one thing really good and then one thing really not good. So
I don't even know how good he reads the read, because it feels like when he gets that ball, he's like, I'm taking this. I'm going to fake the snap. I'm going to fake the dive or whatever, and I'm going to go for it. That play before the halftime is going to haunt Anthony Brown for years to come. I feel like that one play. CJ's up on the corner. I saw your thing. This is how I felt. CJ's got his hands up in the air. Like, what are we doing? It's a one-on-one. The lineman's blocking him. CJ walks into the end zone. And Mario said exactly that same thing. If you run the play the way it was designed, you get a walk-in touchdown. That means that he didn't run it the way it was designed. This could be a big week. You go into a bye week. This would be the time to do it. If you're going to do it, I just feel like all hell is going to break loose in that quarterback room if you do it. I think the whole thing, you're putting all your eggs into one basket, and that basket could be fragile too. The way the injury bug has worked, I think the quarterback room might be next to face it. They haven't got any injuries yet, but as soon as you start that deal, here we go.
Now, Ryan, the benefit to playing the veteran guy was not getting those mistakes. But when we're getting those mistakes, what is the best? So you said, there's no reason to throw Ty in there if he looks where. But if we're getting those mistakes from Brown, why not get him from Ty and let him work it through? Let him learn.
That's why I've converted over. I think that you're at the point now in the season where you have this much room to grow. You have this opportunity. He's got the higher ceiling. You know what you've got with Brown. Mm-hmm. You know exactly what you've got. You got to strike while the iron's hot. You can't afford more losses than this. Yep. And you got to put yourself in the best position going forward. If it is the freshman, then you got to pull the Band-Aid now and go with it.
Brown's older than me. He's not getting any better.
But you know what you have with Anthony? Again, I don't think you need to have the star player be the guy for this offense. I think you need to have a quarterback that's willing to hand the ball off, get out of the way, make the right read, do whatever he needs to do. I don't think you need to have the all-star to be a successful team at Oregon. I think you got a good defense. I think you've got a good running game. You got a good offensive line. They just got to have a quarterback that makes the right decision at the right time. And that you have to have a guy that's willing to be able to make that read. It felt like last year when Tyler was making that read, they weren't even giving him the option. They were just telling him, it's going to be a run or it's going to be
instant pull.
This thing, it felt like every single time Brown was going to keep it, and it was not the right read every time.
Yeah, I think it depends on your aspirations, because I think if you want a quarterback who just makes the right decisions, you're limited. You could win the Pac-12. Do I think you can win a championship with just a right decision maker now in modern football?
No.
Not a chance.
No, but even when we had Marcus Mariota, the Heisman Trophy winner, he still lost by 20 to Ohio State.
That
so again,
was no talent on the team around him. If you have the talent and you get a guy like that, that's when you could try and get over that hump.
And if the nuts and candy and butts are, the idea is like, you have a good thing going on here, but I don't think you're ever going to have that perfect situation. And then here's what's funny. If you do have that perfect situation, fans are going to want it every single year. It's not feasible. You got to strike all the irons hot. You get a good couple, 3 recruiting classes in here. We know about this in college football. I mean, hell, Alabama's been good the last little stretch, but they've had ups and downs too in the last 20 years. Oregon's building a successful brand. They're getting there, but man, oh man, you got to have somebody be able to pull the trigger on this thing that's not going to make those kind of errors, because those errors are going to haunt them. That's going to be that, just that highlight alone of missing that play before halftime is going to be over and over and over and over and over in the minds of the
CJ Riddell jumping up and down.
I mean, everybody in the whole park knew it was the wrong play.
It was the right play. So there were people at first questioning the play call. It was perfectly fine play call.
We knew the play call was going to happen. I told my son that right before it happened. Here comes
the option. To the outside, tackle, but it was a weak corner. Like,
it's a 99% or a 1%. You take the 1%? Come on. That was what's the wrong thing. And it could cost him the gig.
It did. Seems like it did. Momentum was killed right there. We were building up a lot of it, and it's just completely dropped off.
This is exactly why I get both of you on here together. There's a zillion reasons why I get you guys on. There's no question about that. But the combination, the yin yang thing works perfectly. Yeah, Ryan's thinking big picture, Mike. He's thinking big picture.
Well, big picture to me is like, we have a top 10 roster. Top 10 rosters is what you, on average in history, talent composite wise, top 10 rosters above 50% blue chip is what you need historically to compete for national championships, unless you're Chip Kelly. So when we have that, why waste any year? Because Oregon's not had this for very long. This is the first year I think we've been in the top 10, and we're not guaranteed to keep it forever. What if Alabama wants Mario after Saban retires? I'm pretty sure that's the one school I'm worried about him going to.
I just don't think he's the best pick at this point. He's a great recruiter, but man, this guy's got to get some of these big games cashed in.
But what I'm saying in regards to that is we don't know how many years we have of a top 10 roster. We're not 100%. It's not always been a guarantee. Sure. It's not a guarantee going forward. So why waste that on a highest floor guy when you could go with and try and get that one season over the hump? Because that one season can do wonders for your pro. It takes one season to turn you from where we're at, where Penn State's at, where those type of programs are at, to that next tier. You just have to break through, and it gives you an opportunity. So why waste that on the highest floor?
And I don't think they are wasting it. I think the plan going into this year was, this is the guy. We know he's the guy. He has to give us the best opportunity to win. I think major data points have changed since then. You put him into the equation differently right now. And right now you're at a real kind of turning point. The offense is stalled out, hasn't looked that good. Now you're dealing with an injury-ridden team. You don't have the same players on defense that you had. You don't even have anywhere near the depth you had to start the year, which were two things that we kept touting as one of the reasons why they thought they could be in the running. Now all that's been tested. And now you have a situation where there's major question marks across the board about what to do with the running game or what to do with the passing game. Now you got questions about the running game because your major running back's out. It looks like he's out probably the year.
And the next guy up to take his spot has already been out for half the year.
And you have just freshmen behind that. So it's not looking good. And again, I think Oregon's talent-wise is going to buy them victories in the future here, but you have to be able to have that talent and be able to execute, and you have to be able to execute the plays correctly. The margin of error out here is too thin. Even the bad teams are going to get you. Arizona played good against Oregon, felt like they had a chance with, the start of the fourth quarter being a one-score game. And Stanford had Oregon from the jump, totally flattened out in the second half. It looked like Oregon had that game in the bag completely. What
Sounds like
happens?
we're
You
gonna
find a
pull
new
away.
way to lose to Stanford. I mean, geez.
Every time we think we got a good team, Stanford comes in and ruins it.
Oh.
Hey, Mark, I just want to make a note of something I said before the season started. You remember when I said Boston College would get better without Brown? They're better without Brown.
And they're better without Brown with a backup quarterback. They don't even have their starting quarterback. He's injured for the season, Phil Jerkovic. So they're playing
Phil is nice too. Their backup's playing
very inexperienced backup quarterback, but he's getting better by the week. They should have beat Clemson. If they wouldn't have had a bad snap inside the 10-yard line, they would have had a shot. So here's the next thing. I hit Mike with this already. Did you feel robbed? I know that you believe that Oregon let that game go. They should have salted it away, as you just explained. But did you feel robbed with the call at the end, considering how the hand fighting was being called prior to that? They were letting it go. I even caught that. I didn't watch the entire game. I caught the last couple drives. I didn't have a call with an issue with a pass interference call in and of itself, but the way it was being officiated the few plays before that, it was the same play.
Yeah, I on my own little sports chat I do over here, I was like, I'm not a blame the refs guy, and then I went like 15 minutes of blaming the refs. No, I don't really subscribe to that, because you can't put it in the refs' hands. I mean, I just come from that school of you can't let the refs decide a game. It got to be better than that. But boy, oh boy, man, that last drive alone, there was so much going on there. I mean, the fault, it looked like a false start against them. There was an 11-yard gain right in front of the end zone. The guy had the flag out in his hand. I mean, there were so many plays, which is over and over and over. But yeah, that last play, I mean, I was very disappointed. I felt like at that moment, the Ducks lost the game. Right then, hadn't even taken a snap in overtime. They hadn't even scored yet. I already felt like the Ducks had just lost the game. They had done what they needed to do to just eke out a victory. Not good, not happy with it, ugly win, whatever you want to call it. But they were that close to just eking the thing out. And yes, it would have had still the conversations about the quarterback or coaching or time management or clock management, or any of those kind of things. But you still would have had the win. But yeah, I felt like ripped off by that one. And I know the refs have a tough job to do, but it felt like, you know, I've played a lot of basketball and coached a lot of basketball, and you see the guy make the call after the ball makes it or misses it. That's what it felt like there. It felt like make the call before that ball even has a chance to get on the rim, and it felt like they waited and said, I missed it. Okay, there's the foul. And it felt like right after the jump, I thought it was going to be on them. It looked like he pushed off to begin with. I mean, it was just an absolutely catastrophic play for the Ducks, and yeah, just took the win completely out of the sails, and the momentum was toast.
Ryan, I told him it reminded me of the pylon being out of bounds thing with Stanford.
Oh, that was right in front of me at Stanford. Jalen Red stepped on the pylon. The next play, hike it over the guy's head, Herbert's head, for about 40, 50 yard. They pick it up and take it all the way down. I think they took it to the 1 maybe, or they scored.
They scored. It was
they scored, yeah. Point. And that kid, he was a kid from Oregon. That was Brendan Scarlett or whatever. He was the kid from Jesuit. And then talk about a flip. And again, we've seen it over and over and over. When I was a kid, I went down to Stanford. Oregon had the thing. This is probably 88, 87. Remember the guy, Brad Muster? He went and played for the Bears, running back. This is well before your time, Mike. But I'm down there. And
Brad Muster. Sure.
Brad Muster, great player. But anyway, Ducks had it wrapped up. I mean, I'm like 9 years old. I'm in the Bay Area. I'm all stoked. The Ducks have it wrapped up. 1 minute to go. They just give it to Muster 8 times or whatever, march it right down the field, scored with 1 second to go. And I'm like, that was my introduction to Oregon, Stanford. I was like, this is crazy. What do you got to do here? We've seen, I was there for all those ones in Autzen. I mean, the Chip Kelly year, Chip Kelly's blowing everybody out by 40. They couldn't even score 14 points against them. I mean, it's mind blowing. And I don't get it with that team. Why Stanford? Why just them? I don't really think their scheme or they're smart. They don't beat themselves. But whatever reason, just a 3 years ago, CJ Verdell, all you got to do is kneel down a couple times. He fumbles and they go and I mean, it's like, what are we doing, people?
Previously, the issue with Stanford was their size. They were bigger than Oregon, stronger than Oregon, and their wide receivers were tight ends, and they would really smaller corners. But now we had the guys to go toe to toe with that, because Mike Hill was way size mismatch, but Mike Hill was jumping up, and he's like, "You're not catching this." Like, he was playing great, and only in the Pac-12.
But DJ James got burned on that last play.
Oh yeah, and you know what's worth noting?
And there was no safety help. There was no linebacker help. He was on an island. Everybody knew it was going up there.
Jamal Hill played great replacing Bennett Williams.
Had to. I mean, geez,
but I expected that. Jamal was great last year.
He breaks a fibula the day before in a walkthrough, basically. I mean, before they get on the bus to go to the airport, he breaks the leg. What are you talking about for momentum there? And then the first play of the game's targeting.
Tyquez Bridges out.
What are we doing? And then you
down,
get
KT
DBs? With the targeting with a minute to go. Oh, Lord. And we can just keep going on and on and on. This was an all-timer. It's just absolute all-timer. I mean, again, like I said before on this, I got nowhere to go. I was born on campus. I'm multi-generational for the U of O. I'm out here. I'm a season ticket holder. My son's going to go there in 3 years. We're not going anywhere. There is no other team jumping on any sort of bandwagon. We're in the ground here. But
Jefferson Middle, I have no choice.
But you got a great, like Mike said, you got a great opportunity right now with Cristobal, with these recruiting classes. You've never done recruiting like this in the history of Oregon football. Now you're in a situation where you can really have high expectations. And what happens? You lose in week 2 of the freaking league schedule. I mean, I guess if you're going to lose early, right? Because in a couple years past, we lost ASU right before the Beeve game. So it's like, I guess you lose early. But still, it brings us back to the same old situation where we're like, we thought we could compete with the best, and now it's back to, well, maybe we could compete with the second best team out of the Big Ten.
Yeah. Well, in Oregon's best years, we did lose early when we had a loss. In 2014, we lost to Arizona early on. Obviously, we got a chance to avenge that. Arizona ended up being a good team. I don't think Stanford is going to be what that one magical Khalil Tate year of Arizona was.
Right.
But losing early, I mean, for a lot of college football playoff contenders, has been way better than losing late. I would much rather lose to Stanford now than lose to Washington.
Oh, God. Just saying that losing to Washington makes me sick to my stomach.
Okay, going into
I'm gonna
be
there
you
too
told
in
me to
Seattle.
Pick. Now, Oregon State is looking a little scary instead.
I can accept an Oregon State loss, but this year, buddy, Washington started the year losing to Montana. If Oregon goes up there and loses to Washington this year, they already lost to the Beavs and Montana in the same year. You want to talk about fan bases that are furious. At least we're ranked in the top 10 still with our loss. Washington fan base is delirious and furious at the same time. Yep. They don't know what direction to go in.
Ryan, I got a little hot take for you. It's going to be very different depending on the generation of Duck fan. I don't consider Oregon State a rival. I root for them 11 weeks of the year.
They're in-house.
Yeah, I root for them 11 weeks of the year. And I went to middle school in Jefferson, Oregon. I was supposed to play for Jefferson High School, but I never hated Oregon
I drive
State.
99 down. I drive through Jefferson. I take the back road by a Forest.
There you go.
Oh, you know.
Yeah, we moved to Central Florida right before my freshman year.
Well, I'm not with that necessarily because my family has all sorts of anti-Beeve rhetoric that I grew up with, but as older I get, the more sensible I get as a Duck fan, as a college football fan. I want the Oregon State Beavers to do well. I don't want them to be a laughingstock. It does nothing for us. But I don't want them to be too good. I don't want the Ducks to be better.
But I want Washington to be a laughingstock.
I don't look at them as not a rival because we're so much better, because that just sets us up for failure like we did last year. But the Washington thing is more in line with a real rivalry, in the sense that we don't like them. They don't like us. We both know it. We both have something to lose, and we're both a similar school. Oregon and Washington are kind of the same type of school for each state, as opposed to Oregon and Oregon State being like the ag school and the business school or whatever. So we're in line with the Huskies. I also grew up with them shaking the gold pom-poms at us down I-5 in the gold Mercedes-Benzes, right? They had it rolling in the 80s and 90s. So they know all about this, but they've also gone 0-12. So there's a little comedy there. So I would never, ever, ever want to root for the Huskies. And last on Saturday, we had that situation where I was rooting for the Beavs to beat the Huskies. I mean, look at where that's at. If that's a true rivalry, then who am I rooting for, right?
Yeah, and then, I mean, it's the thing. It's like, it's not that we're so much better than Oregon State. It's that, at least in my lifetime, there's never been anything for me to consider it a rivalry.
Years, right.
Yeah, like I'm 23 years old. Oregon State's been good once in that period, and that I could barely remember being around then. Like,
there was 10 years in there where the home team won every year, so that we had to give the Beavs that. And then I think it was 07 was the last year that they won twice in a row, and then the Ducks just went on a crazy run where they were beating everybody. But I was at the Randall game when we lost up there, and last year nobody was there for fans. But That was a brutal game last year too. I'm excited to go to this year's Civil War and see what happens. Man, that's my favorite game of the year every year.
So Mike 3883 asked a question I wanted to answer, but we were having a good conversation. He said, which teams have given Oregon the most fits in recent history? Whoever we play in the state of Arizona.
Yeah.
Not any one of the two teams. Whoever we play in Arizona. If it's at Arizona or at Arizona State, it's not fun.
Yeah, Stanford hasn't been a problem until, this year. The last couple of years, Stanford hasn't been that big of an issue, but
Washington State more so than Stanford.
In my lifetime, I've seen Stanford come in at just the absolute sweetest time to knock the Ducks off, and that irks me big time. As a kid, I never had a problem with Stanford. In my adult life, I absolutely can't stand them.
Recently, they have given us fits, I feel like. In 2012 with the Anthony Thomas's missed block.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying. In all the, I'm saying, but the last couple years or whatever.
Oh,
yeah.
When they're losing 38 players to the transfer portal, it feels like. I mean, it's hard to.
And I respect the heck out of David Shaw. He just hates the Ducks, I feel like. He despises the Ducks.
Because a lot of the Pac-12 are like these astute universities known for their academia, like Cal Berkeley,
right?
The University of Washington, Stanford, right. And then there's just like Oregon, who's just like, yeah, come film a low-budget film on our campus, and we're just gonna play football and have fun. Yeah, good school too. Because
Oregon and Washington are both very good academic schools, and Oregon State's a tremendous academic school. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the best in the country. So yeah, there's no problem. That's one of the big deals about expansion. I don't think anybody's picking Boise State or anybody else because they just don't cut it academically. I think that's a major hurdle for Pac-12 expansion. That's a big deal.
Does Arizona State qualify for academics?
Arizona State barely. Biggest school in the country, though. A lot of kids there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I love the dynamic of the Pac-12.
The team that has given Oregon the most fits is Oregon. I think Oregon beats itself more than anything else. Especially on these runs like this, it's always something, and it's going to happen. And every time you think, oh, the Ducks are going to go undefeated this year, don't say that out loud because it's going to happen at some point. And even the year that they did go undefeated, they lost in the championship to Auburn. It's like,
oh man, I don't want to talk about that game. That was one of my first major Duck. I have other games that I remember. I remember Oregon versus Michigan. I remember some games before that. But that 2010 game was the first year I was a super big fan. I had understood football. I really was taking it more serious playing it. And, I was riding high. Then we go in, play Auburn, and I'm just like, man.
I was in the building for that one too. I mean, when Jeff Mail got that 2-point conversion, I was like, here we go. And then all of a sudden the ball fell out. Again, I've seen it so many times. I'm not surprised by it at this point.
It's always fun.
Got Mike Black on the line from Fifth Quarter College Football. And, of course, Ryan Winter, who's joined us for many years here at the Voice of College Football. You can catch Ryan and his work right here on YouTube on Sports Chat 503. And you can hear why I like to get these two together at the same time. So, Ryan, you talked about the Pac-12. You talked about Oregon with one loss. Mike had addressed this to a certain degree, but I think there's more there. How damaging is this loss to Oregon and the Pac-12?
Nationally, I mean, I think Pac-12 is hanging by a thread. So I thought this year that you needed to have an undefeated champion to be able to even be in the conversation. I was surprised when Oregon jumped to 3, to be honest. I knew they would jump because of that Ohio State win, but I thought 3 was a little much. But, it is what it is. Oregon wasn't going to say no to it. I just think that this is a huge, huge deal. I mean, I think Oregon is probably now slotted to maybe try to compete with the Pac-12 championship, but I think any hopes for the Pac-12 at all being in the conversation nationally, I think are dashed. I think a lot of things could happen. I mean, you could have chaos in front of them, but I think they would find a way to put the Pac-12 out in any way, shape, or form, unless you had a great opponent. Oregon had everything going for them because they had that win with Ohio State. And I think going forward next year, for example, when Oregon plays Georgia, they're going to have to beat Georgia to be in the conversation. I think realistically, I don't think you do that again where you lose the first game and find yourself undefeated at the end of the year. I mean, I think that's too hard to do. So I think it was a major hit.
Do you think it was a major hit? No question about that. Do you think it was that critical, Mike? I think you're a little more optimistic.
Not considering the teams ahead of us. So let's just say, for sake of argument, I know with the SEC it's not guaranteed and not even likely. But let's just say one team from every conference ahead of us got in. We'd be the first out. There's 3 Big Ten teams, 2 SEC teams, a Big 12 team, and a Group of 5 team. Oklahoma has looked very mortal. They could very much lose to Texas this coming week. Iowa, Penn State, Ohio State all have to play each other. And if it comes down to Ohio State, we do have that head-to-head win. Alabama and Georgia. Georgia's the one who I think is undisputed. I think they're going to roll through their schedule. I think they're going to beat Bama. Bama probably gets in even with that loss, unless they slip up somewhere else. But Auburn's looking good. Some other teams in the SEC are looking good. Auburn's only loss would be to the number 4 Penn State team. A lot of these teams are going to have to play each other by the end of the year. And us only dropping to 8 was a godsend. If we dropped, I agree. If we dropped below, 12, I would agree with you, which I expected to. I didn't expect to only drop 3 spots.
Agree. I thought we would be 12.
Well, but what is odd about what the committee has done to itself, and they're going to have to wiggle their way out of this if Ohio State and Oregon run the table, is that exactly that. So it shouldn't be to anybody surprised that Ohio State's the highest ranked 1-loss team, even though they really haven't beaten anybody that good. They just didn't drop. And but that's what you get for winning all the time. So that's the kind of the treatment that you get at a few different places. I don't agree with it. I've got Oregon ranked ahead of Ohio State. They beat them head to head and they got the same record. But Ohio State's going to be facing much more difficult competition than Oregon. So they're going to do nothing but build up their resume. But if they both keep winning, Oregon has to be put into a playoff ahead of Ohio State if they both go 12-1 and are conference champions. I think.
Yeah, you showed it on the field. You could say, oh, yeah, they got better throughout the season and, they played tougher opponents. But they showed it on the field. Oregon won that game.
But how is the committee going to get around? Well, I guess it's not the committee, first and foremost. Obviously, these are not their rankings.
They're normally not too far off.
These are the AP rankings, of course.
I think that's a big deal, though, Mark.
That far off, but it's kind of curious that Ohio State's going to be playing a better schedule. They're ranked ahead of Oregon.
You know what it seems
There's no way you can select them over Oregon.
It seems like the AP has been trying to do what the playoff committee claims they do, which is take injuries into account, which might be why Oregon jumped so high after beating Ohio State, because of the players we were down. You're down your arguably 2 best players. I love Sewell, but if Flo's playing all year, are we sure Flo's not better off of what we saw already? I mean, I know it's kind of, ridiculous to think, but Flo is that talented. And lose your best 2 players, beat Ohio State. And then I think maybe the reason we only dropped 3 is because of how many players we were down. I think it was 7 players on defense, 2 players on offense, an offensive coordinator. All weren't able to play throughout the entire game. Plus, I had started drinking before Kayvon got ejected. So I didn't even realize he got ejected. Yeah. And if they do take that into account, as they say, I think it could really benefit us.
I would say, I agree to all these points. I think that Ohio State has the best opportunity because they're going to have the toughest schedule going forward. If Penn State wins against Iowa and Ohio State beats Penn State, I think you've set yourself up for a pretty good resume there. They also have, if Oregon keeps winning, they have the best loss of anybody. I do think, though, you're right, that it, depending on how the actual playoff committee ranks them when they put out their rankings, that could be a different thing. They could take the head-to-head because they have said that head-to-head means something to them. But I think the whole Cincinnati thing is going to be an interesting one. I thought if Notre Dame beat Cincinnati, then Notre Dame would put a pressure on the situation, because both those schedules look like their future looks pretty simple, to be honest, not a huge in front of them. I also think Oklahoma's going to be right there at the end. I know people haven't liked Oklahoma this year. I agree, but they're not doing great on offense. They're barely beating teams, and they're dropping in the rankings every week. Every week they win a game and they drop. So the committee's also proven that they'll move teams around even if they are winning. But it seems to me that automatics, you're going to have the 2 SEC schools, the way that those 2 schools are playing. I don't think anybody in the country would have a problem with those
Georgia
2 schools playing in the 4 team, and they'll probably see each other for the championship. Who knows? But I do think that you're going to find a way to get the Big Ten in, because I do think the Big Ten is the second best conference, and then you're going to find a way to get the Big 12 in, and the Pac-12 is going to be on the way out.
See, I don't know. I think Oklahoma loses this game, and I think they probably drop another one.
Well, they got this one and then the Oklahoma State at the end of the year. But other than that, the Big 12's been a little up and down with – they've got some wins there. They've got some teams with some wins, but it's not the greatest opponents that they're facing either.
No, but Oklahoma always they were losing most years to Kansas State. Like they
barely escaped
and they
year.
have struggled against bad teams.
Big
so
time.
and Oregon was struggling against bad teams, and it cost them eventually.
And
Oklahoma could be in the same scenario.
Right, and it's the offense that they can't control right now, which is normally not the problem. Normally they outscore the heck out of everybody. It's their defense. Now it feels like their offense is not the thing that's clicking. So there's question marks there for sure. But I think there's a lot of teams out there. I know BYU has a weird situation. They could go undefeated and still not be able to qualify for it or something. I think they're just a New Year's Six team. But the idea is that there's a lot of teams in it right now. I mean, I was talking with a guy today who's convinced he thinks Michigan is going to win out. I was like, what are we talking about? It's week 5. Every year we have this with the 5 teams or 5-0 teams. I said, it'll all work itself out by the end of the year. The Blue Bloods will be there at the end. And if Oregon is in the 6 or 5 conversation and Ohio State's right in front of them, then yes, you're going to have a lot of people out there, if they do have the same record, saying this isn't right. Oregon beat them head to head. And maybe you have a weird thing where it flips at the very last second. But at this point, I'm at 90% sure that the Pac-12 is going to be out.
I think the main impact of it is if you do make the playoffs, you wanted to be that 2 seed and avoid playing one of the SEC schools, because they're going to play 1v4 most likely, because one will be just coming off of a loss. And you wanted to not play an SEC school in the first round. But now with that loss of Stanford, you're very much likely, in my opinion, to play Georgia. Not going to be a fun game, especially if we have no deep threat passing game and we try to go their front 7.
People don't want to hear this. I say this quite often when we get down to this. Would you rather have a national championship berth and get blown out, or would you rather go to the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day and play the second best team out of the Big Ten and have a good shot at it, possibly end the year with a win and rejoice? Now, as a fan, somebody who's going to actually be in the stadium, at that point, I'd choose the Rose Bowl. I've been to the national championship and lost that thing. I've been to a Rose Bowl where we won it. Hell of a lot better day to be at the Rose Bowl.
But to get to the Natty and lose, you want a playoff game.
Or I'm talking about losing the first round of the playoff game. I'm talking about that first week. You're already done. I don't see the Ducks winning the first game. I mean,
the biggest diss on Oregon right now is, hey, you haven't made the playoff in so many years. The biggest diss on the Pac-12 is you guys don't ever make the playoff. It's not you haven't made a Rose Bowl.
But because it's contractual. I thought, buddy, trust me, I thought the Ducks had every shot at it. They looked like they were the part. They had that opportunity. But I think that unless they play phenomenally better in the next 5 weeks or so, I don't think you're going to see it. I think if they keep playing the way they're playing right now, they'll lose to Washington or UCLA on the road or whatever.
I think there's only one roster in the country that if they pull it together, and I'm not forecasting this, I think the odds are still stacked against them, but they are the one team that could stand in the same field with Georgia and Alabama, and that's Ohio State. If they pull their act together, I think they're the only roster that's got enough talent to do it, but they're not playing like that, and they probably won't. Most teams show their hands by 5 games, show what they're going to be, and a lot of improvement is difficult to that degree to accomplish. So I'm going to make a statement, and either one of you or both of you can either take your medicine or you can push back on it. And I hate to do this because you guys are amazing guests, and I love having you guys here. I don't even consider you guests. You guys are contributors here at the Voice of College Football, of course.
Thanks, Mark.
The Pac-12 is awful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They've proven it. You can't lose if you're Washington, you can't start the year losing to Montana at home. That's unacceptable. Arizona lost to NAU the week before they played the Ducks. What kind of favor are you doing the Ducks on that point? You can't do that. If you're a Power 5 conference, you cannot lose to the lower conferences. That's just not acceptable.
We're still better than the ACC, and that's all that matters to me. I think if UCLA didn't beat LSU and we didn't beat Ohio State, I wouldn't be saying that.
I
But
think there are good teams out here, and I think there's good football out here. But
UCLA would win
comparatively,
the ACC this year.
when the
And-
Pac-12 shows up in these bowl games, they get embarrassed. When they have these non-conference games, if it wasn't for the Ducks beating Ohio State and UCLA beating LSU, we would have been completely steamrolled.
Yep.
So I think Ryan will agree to this and attest to this, that I've done my best throughout the years to stick up for the Pac-12
You
and
have, Mark.
be very fair
I
with
love that.
the Pac-12. But my
This year's
goodness,
bad.
I make these conference rankings videos just about every week, and I run the numbers and I look at it. And so the other 4 conferences all basically win 80% of the games out of conference. Like if you take them all into account, not just the Power 5, the FCS, and the Group of 5. And there's more to it than this, but the Pac-12 16-16 out of conference. They've lost 7 games to FCS and Group of 5 team. The other conferences don't do that. The ACC doesn't even do that.
No. I mean, the Beavs are the number 1 team in the North right now, and they lost to Purdue to start the year. Who's worried about Purdue in the Big Ten?
No one.
I mean,
Nobody in the
Stanford
Central.
just beat Oregon. They lost to K-State. Who's worried about K-State in the Big 12?
Oklahoma.
Well, but my
No,
point
they
is
just
that
beat them last week.
I
Mike,
think there's
that
a
would have been a
good
good joke last week.
I think there's good football out here, and I think that there's good matchups week to week. But yes, when the Big 12 comparatively, SEC, Big 10, I don't think there's any way. I think Cincinnati has a better win against Notre Dame than any other school in the Pac-12 has on their schedule who would be even close. Oregon has the best win against Ohio State. Other than that, there's nobody. And the bigger picture of like having to
Stanford,
schedule these games to try to prove this thing always backfires. It would be better off having all these schools play all these lower division teams, even though they halftime they lose to them too. My point is that if Oregon continues to be the team to beat in the Pac-12, they're going to have to play somebody of relevancy out here. They're not going to play one team that's going to be ranked the rest of the year. Maybe the Beavs by the end of the year if the Beavs keep winning. Maybe. But that's it. That's terrible. Can't have that.
Yep.
And to start the year, they gave all these teams in the Pac-12 rankings. There was like 5 teams ranked in the first week or so.
Yep.
They all lost. Oh, God,
And
Mark,
Fresno
I don't
losing
know,
to
man.
Hawaii didn't
It's a
help
rough
either.
one, bro. And then Fresno loses to Hawaii.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
I
like
know.
one
I
thing
was-
after the
I was thinking that watching that, I was thinking this is making it even worse.
Yeah. I mean, if Chip Kelly's number 1 win of his UCLA time as a coach is to beat a halfway LSU team on a week of a hurricane where they had to stay in Houston for the week, coming off of that's maybe a 7-5 team, maybe right, maybe 8 wins this year if they squeak that out. I mean, that's the best win. Wow.
Stanford's got a better win than Cincinnati now.
Yeah, I guess so. And people still think USC's got talent, and that Stanford.
I mean, they have Drake London.
Oh,
who's an
God.
absolute monster.
But even USC, I mean, we
they're not
need
good.
every one of these teams who has any national relevancy to be good. We have to have them. We
USC
cannot get by with having ASU as the torchbearer for the South.
USC is going to try and hire a name, and they're going to mess it up, and they're going to do us no favors.
They'll continue to screw this
Just
thing up.
promote. I know you guys lost the game you shouldn't have already. Just promote Dante. Let him build like a solid culture, and just do something that's not. Hey, let's make a big splash and it not work.
Yeah,
We need help.
Yeah, I think the Pac-12 is just in its own way so separated geographically from everybody else. Their times are different. Their culture is a little different, and people just don't care about it. I mean, the Ducks have a pretty good fan base. Utah has a pretty good fan base. Other than that, there's not that many teams out here in the Pac-12 that like really get fired up. I mean, you have like 5,000 people come out to a spring game. In the South, they like fill the stadium for a spring game. I mean, come on now. You just the interest is not there, and the dedication isn't there from the university presidents either.
So you believe Oregon and Utah have the most dedicated and the largest fan bases in the Pac-12?
I think Arizona gets really fired up too, especially when they start winning, and they do a really good job in basketball. They historically have the number one basketball attendance every single year. So they do a good job of filling their stadium in the Zona Zoo. They do a good job of filling that. But you can go around the country, around our conference, and see, Washington State, when they're not good, it's a tiny stadium. It looks like a high school stadium. Washington is already abandoning their team big time, especially after this Beeve loss. It's going to get brutal. I've already seen their ticket prices go down, and that was like the greatest setting in college football, when they had it rolling. UCLA, there's just tremendous amount. I mean, look at that thing. That's an empty barn. USC's even worse.
Bandwagon.
USC's even worse.
If you're not good, we're not showing up.
Thousands and thousands of empty seats for a quality game. Stanford, nowhere near. You didn't even sell out the bottom bowl against Oregon. What could you have a bigger game? I don't know.
And that's what goes through somebody's mind like myself,
right,
who watches a lot of Big Ten football, the SEC. When I'm watching that Stanford-Oregon game in the fourth quarter, I'm not surprised because I've been watching Stanford football forever. Sure. But I'm like, wow, there's like nobody there.
Yeah, it's not because there's
like nobody there.
It's been that way for years. I mean, we go play games when Oregon was really good, and it'd be like at best for the other team, 50-50 Oregon and the other team. It's like,
big time.
Why
because the Duck fans travel.
And because Oregon fans travel really well, especially even when we went to Tennessee, we traveled really well. But it's just like none of the rest of the Pac-12 doesn't get up for it.
When they redo these old stadiums out here, they shrink them. They took thousands of seats out of the Coliseum when they redid it 2 years ago. They took thousands of seats out of Stanford and Memorial Coliseum for Cal. They shrink the stadiums. Where else in the country is shrinking their stadiums?
Only Eugene has increased theirs in recent times that I can remember, right?
Corvallis is going to extend theirs too a little bit. But who else is shrinking stadiums? I mean, come on.
Oregon State's got a really passionate fan base. It's just not massive.
They do. I mean, I think every school has their. I mean, Colorado. I'm not trying to diss on the rest of the Pac-12. They all do their thing, but it's just a different thing out here comparatively to the Big Ten, to the SEC, even the Big 12. You have these stadiums packed. It doesn't matter who's playing. They could be playing Tulane. It's packed.
So liquor.
Remember, Saban got on those guys for leaving early a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You look at Oregon when they leave early. I mean, what are you talking about? There's nobody left in the stadium.
Yeah. Sell liquor at Arizona State's games and they'll sell out.
So I guess there needs to be some kind of sociological or demographic study that's got to answer this question for me, because I got to think there's all sorts of contributing factors.
There is.
One would be that a lot of these people on the West Coast are transplants from elsewhere.
True.
Maybe more so than other places in the country.
True.
I think a big issue is the amount of teams in California and the amount of different professional sports teams in California.
Sports teams or professional sports.
But it's also just a cultural thing. I always hear fans say, "Well, we have other things to do out here." It's like, you can't hike and fish and do everything else in other parts of the country. It's beautiful out here, true, but then it starts to rain. What are you gonna do? I just think that there's a different whole thing out here. It's a different vibe completely.
Well, Cali doesn't.
Dedication.
They don't want to go out there and watch a loss. Like when the Lakers started being bad, they weren't selling out as much. They were starting to lose attendance, and when the Lakers are good again, sold out every game. Where did those fans go? They just didn't want to go watch a team lose. And I don't agree with it. I would still go watch Oregon lose if I could, but it's just a different way of life there. I mean, if you're losing, they're not going to come watch you. There's no reason for them to come watch you.
I also think that all of sports have taken a little bit in the last 5 to 10 years, a little bit of an attendance hit. The amount of quality television, the amount of quality shots you're getting with cameras, the price of the games, the price of travel, the price of just getting gas to go to the game for some people. Most of these environments on the West Coast also are in college towns. They're not in the major city. Besides Los Angeles and Seattle, you don't really have, you got to go across the bay to get to Berkeley. You got to go all the way down to Stanford if you're in the Bay Area. And, cost of living. I don't know if you guys realize this as well, but cost of living out here is taxed. I mean, dude, it costs a pretty penny to live on the West Coast. So it's not like there's a tremendous amount of disposable income for everybody either. So I think people kind of pick and choose where they want to spend their entertainment dollar. I know specifically in Portland, there are people who get season tickets to go to the Blazers. They get 42 or 41 home games a year. And they pay pretty much the same price as what Duck fans are going to pay to have season tickets for 7 games a year at Autzen, where you got to drive 2 hours to get to the game. So there's a lot of incentive there for people to not go to these college stadiums.
I also think there's a time element. It's an event. It's an entire
All
day.
day.
And you're a working person. You work Monday through Friday. You only have 2 weekend days off. So you're going to take, instead of just flipping the game on at game time and being done with it when the game's over, and you can shut the TV off and then go to the beach or go to the mall or whatever you want to do, you got to invest a lot of time with traffic and sitting in the stadium an hour before the game. And, it's like a 7-8 hour event.
Easy. And the games take forever in the stadium as well. Every game's on television now. The old days of being able to go into a stadium, see a 2-hour game. No way. Everything is now delayed. They get the guys on the headset. It takes them 5 minutes to set up the thing so they can look at the review. I mean, everything takes time now. And they have to do little song and dance between every single advertisement, everything else. I mean, it's wild. The in-game experience is still great. I still love it because I'm used to it, but I get it wherever people are like, nah, I'll just take it on my couch. I'll drink a beer here. It's all good.
So I kind of want to address that question.
Yeah, I do as well.
But before,
go ahead.
Before I do that, one thing that's kind of weird in this, even down here, I live in Florida. I'll go to Gainesville, even on a Gator game that's not sold out. You go to the bar across the street from the stadium, or you go to like you go by the frat houses, packed. They just don't want to go into the game. They're just like, hey, we can all get absolutely hammered out here, have the game on a giant screen sitting in a yard of a frat house, and just have a gay old time. I think it's going to improve. It's going to get back to normal in the South with them starting to allow alcohol sales in the stadiums. I think that was a huge thing. But
what you guys witnessed with the Ohio State-Oregon game is completely uncommon, and it was very strange because it was such a big game that Ohio State did not sell that game out. I believe they didn't meet the sellout because, truth be known, I hate to reveal this from time to time, I'm 53 years old, and Ohio State, the only time they came close to not selling out a game was in 1982 because they had lost 3 consecutive games, and they almost didn't sell out a game. That place seats 111,000, and it's sold out every game. And to Ryan's point, Youngstown State, Akron, some horrible opponents.
Yes.
And it's still always sold out. But with COVID, with the ticket prices,
were insane for that game.
I don't think they hit the sellout. I knew that there was like 10,000.
Somebody bought the tickets, but nobody actually came to the game. Like somebody just bought it, so it's a sellout. But
technically,
a booster bought tickets.
Well, this question, if you don't mind jumping on this is a good question.
Absolutely.
This NIL takeaway from the Nike deal. I'm not exactly,
because if I could set this up real quick before you get
the Division
for
Street
anybody
thing,
that's a lot of people tell us that they listen to this and don't necessarily watch to know what question is asked. So Mike 3883 says, does NIL take away from the Nike deal? Players can make their own deals now with corporations. And I think Oregon has been an interesting and unique question in this since NIL came up that I've been asked a number of times about the Nike situation being so connected, of course, to the University of Oregon. So I've got the two right guys on here to address that.
Did you see the new company, Mark?
Pardon me?
Did you see the new company that was formed?
Yeah, Division Street. So this is an interesting one because I don't know if that's talking about that or just Nike in general.
Do you know who's all involved in that, Mark? It's Clutch Sports. So Rich Paul, Phil Knight, a bunch of former Nike executives, including one of their ex-CEOs for women's sports. It includes United Airlines. It includes Pat Kilkenny.
All the heavyweight.
It includes, a bunch of heavyweight Ducks and a bunch of heavyweight corporate business people who had no relation with the Ducks previously. Yeah. And Nike, pretty much Nike, convinced them to form this company specifically with the purpose to helping Oregon athletes with NIL deals. So it's involving if you want to take the broad scheme of things, it's involving LeBron James, Jordan Brand, Nike Brand, United Airlines, and all the boosters at Oregon, plus some other executives from other companies.
And what it's doing is it's kind of separating itself from Nike and becoming kind of its own entity with a lot of brain trust, obviously, connection with Nike, but not running off of Nike's dime, but more on the level of creating its own in-house kind of factory to help these guys and women be able to line up deals. It's very interesting.
Rich Paul was
really
huge for that.
future focused and player focused to their own interests. It's really cool.
I was really shocked to see Rich Paul like specifically named as part of it, which is LeBron's obviously longtime best friend, runs Clutch Sports, and I think that was awesome.
Well, I think they're just trying to get the best of the brightest on this to start this thing up, and then obviously
schools
I
are
don't
going to
think
follow
they'll
suit.
have a huge say in it. You know, even Sabrina, I don't think is going to have a huge say in the thing. I think they're going to get people to kind of run it, but what it's unique is that it's a situation set up for Oregon athletes. It didn't say college athletes. It said University of Oregon athletes. So I do think that's one step up. We knew this was coming. You know that there's influence there. Nike does not come around Eugene and just hand out handfuls of cash. It's not how it goes. But Nike is very influential. Nike is also very influential to all other teams that have the Nike deal. I mean, Ohio State has a bigger Nike check than Oregon does every single year. I guarantee it, for their whole athletic budget, because it's a huge athletic budget. But Nike specifically does some things at Oregon that are different than other places. They use Oregon as a testing ground for a lot of their newer innovations with their jerseys, with their shoes, with all the other sort of stuff that they do. And then they also look at it as an opportunity to expand their brand with the youth. They want to connect to the next generation. They always want to get the freshest minds and the newest thing in there at Nike, constantly looking at the future. And so they're trying to set up a situation where they can have a platform so that these kids can come in, get established in the community, and then from there, just jump into it and start making money.
Yeah, it's really helped because as Oregon started, you know, obviously Nike was huge in Oregon becoming a decent football program and being a good football program. And as the athletics got better, the attendance started to rise. Well, the University of Oregon does feed a lot of Nike's employees. So, I mean, there's direct mutual benefit for Nike, as well as obviously the history behind it. And it's really cool to see Oregon be first at something involving NIL. I mean, I know that was coming. We had the first NFT, I believe, with Kayvon Thibodeau. And then LSU had the first deal with the sports book with Caesar's Palace. And, you know, it's really cool to see. I want to see who comes out with this next. My guess would be either Miami or USC.
Yeah. One of the things also I think that's important to understand about this is for all athletes. So, you know, I think Oregon is track town, always has been. You know, we talk football here, and football drives the needle for most people, but Eugene is still track
town, USA.
Big time. And track athletes have a unique kind of path to their profession. And so I think this is also incredibly concentrated on getting track athletes more closely lined up to getting deals and promoting themselves as an individual brand, rather than you'd see a lot of team sport guys do. I think you will see the football players, basketball players take advantage of it, but I still think the individual side is going to have a much bigger deal. I mean, like Aaron Wise, for example, the golfer that went on, now he's a PGA golfer. You know, he
gets
could have had
cool
huge revenues through the golf community. His senior year when he was the golfer of the year and they won the national championship in golf.
His Nike check is nice.
His Nike check is nice, but he could have started that process years
in
before.
College. Yeah.
And again, I think this goes back to that argument of people love to talk about when you have the opportunity to go, you go. Well, if you can start making some money before, that might give you an opportunity to stay. And there have these guys who try to jump for the money every year when they're a junior and they're not ready yet. The NFL forecasts them as maybe a 4th or 5th round pick or something, and they still go. And in basketball as well. Basketball, these guys want to jump immediately. They want to be one and done. They want to do this, that, and the other. Giving them a little bit of a check early might keep them incentivized to stay until their craft is actually ready to get to the next level and actually make the real money. Because all these pro athletes will tell you that the first contract's fine, but you got to get to that second contract. And these are the kind of people in your corner to have you set yourself up to where you can get to that point. If that's the goal, then that's the deal. I don't think it's necessarily trying to hand out money to recruits or try to say, oh, recruits can come here and make a lot of money. I still think you have to be able to be the player and be the personality to do it. But I do think that this is a nice opportunity for Nike to, one, separate itself from the Nike division and create something brand new to really help the players individually.
I think it's going to be just this, you know, it's going to be huge for track, but I think what they're going to take advantage of is the women's sports.
Big time.
because I mean, some of the most marketable women in collegiate sports of late have been Oregon Ducks.
Big time.
Aside from the acrobatics girl at LSU, Olivia Doon, and the basketball players at UConn, and Sarah from Vanderbilt, the kicker.
Right.
You know, a lot of the most marketable female athletes of late have been, you know, Haley Cruz, have been Sabrina Ionescu, have been Jasmine Sivers, you know, all these players, and I think they're going to take a huge step towards that.
Yeah, and with it's a great point, Mike, because with this era of Title IX, you know, me growing up in the 80s was right at the beginning of this kind of a thing, you know, and you really have seen this thing blossom now to where you have a full-blown sports industry with women across the board that are taking their own viewer share of whatever the big bottom line is for ESPN or anything else. And they will start marketing for this. I mean, Sabrina, perfect example. I mean, what she could have garnished her senior year by being the face of the franchise, beating the United States team in that preseason game, going all the way down. Now, obviously, it would have gotten interrupted by COVID anyway. But that last year, Sabrina could have put herself in a position to make some serious bank going forward. And just the bang for the buck alone on just advertisements. I mean, what she could have made just with advertisements that year when her name was across the board in women's sports. I mean, it's a pretty penny.
The highest paid NIL athlete at LSU is not a football player, not a basketball player. It's a women's, it's not track and field. It's like tumbling, acro and tumbling.
Acrobatics and tumbling.
Yeah, it's a women's acrobatics and tumblings athlete. So, I mean, there's a market there. I mean, you just have to, you know, put money into it to see anything come out of it. A lot of schools haven't been investing in these women's sports, and the ones that do are seeing a return from it. I'm pretty sure Oregon's women's basketball is in the green. One of probably very few women's basketball teams in the green, aside from the UConns of the world. Right. And, you know, you just have to take that initial hit, invest in the program, and you'll get your return. I mean, there's something to invest in there. There's some great athletes over there, and it's just time for schools to start investing in it more.
Yeah, and I think companies like Nike, I think Adidas will be on this as well. I think there's all these corporations that are going to want to try to create their opportunity because they're trying to get their next spokespeople and next athletes to be lined up for them as well. I think that a lot of people talk about Nike specifically, but, you know, Adidas handed out a huge check to Washington. You know, there's other brands doing this, you know, across the board. It just so happens that Nike was born in Eugene, stayed here in Oregon, and has that much power and controls the market share. So I do think that Nike and Oregon have a unique relationship. I think it's an organic relationship. It's an authentic relationship. It's not forced. And I do think that they reap the rewards of it. But I also think that Nike cuts a lot of great checks to a lot of schools. They spread the money around.
It's also great that the 76th richest person on earth was our former athletic director. Love it.
Exceptional take, boys. Appreciate that. Everyone, you can catch Ryan Winter, Sports Staff 503, right here on YouTube. Mike Black, of course, on Fifth Quarter College Football, and your podcast. Are you still doing the
Ducks and Dogs? Yes, sir, I am. Me and Matt still do that every week.
Excellent. Everybody can catch me after the NFL game tonight. Bring your calls, your questions. Man, we went on and on forever on Saturday night because people were fired up about college football, and we had about 300 strong on the line, and I couldn't get you folks off the line. That's a good thing. I appreciate that. I'm not complaining. That's a good thing that I have to say, stop calling. We're not taking any more calls. So thank you, everyone out there. And again, I'll be on. It seems to be a popular time after the NFL game on Monday night, so we'll do that. Ryan, thanks for jumping on last minute notice. I reached out to Mike and we threw something together here in the last hour or so. And Mike, as always, appreciate you jumping on the line as well. So you guys have a bye this Saturday and then a big Friday night game. So I'll be able to check that one out against Cal.
Start Ty Thompson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't thank you enough, Mark. Voice of college football. You're the best in the biz, bud.
Appreciate it.
Mark.
See you guys. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Once again, we appreciate you being here on the Oregon channel. If you like the Ducks, of course, subscribe. We've got 26 total channels. It got a main channel, got 25 team channels. So most of the main teams across the nation, from the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, Pac-12, 2 from the Pac-12, Oregon, USC, and the ACC as well. So lock it in. If you just want to help us grow the channel, then find a channel with less than 1,000 subs and subscribe right there. Appreciate y'all being here. I'm going to be online to take your calls after the NFL game tonight. See you then.